Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very special session today. I'm excited to introduce our new offer. It's been launched for a couple of weeks now. This is something that we do often at GMF, but not for this specific case, which is, I think, a very special and unique offer with some great guests speaking on it. So very happy to have you all here. And if you would like, I encourage you all to add your organization behind your name in the chat. That's always helpful to see if you're from a municipality or from a company or research institution. It's always good to see. So thanks for joining and feel free to do that. Bienvenue tout le monde. On est hâte de vous voir aujourd'hui.
Hello, everyone. We're looking forward to seeing you today, and we'll have great presentations from our panelists.
I can just kick it off. So next slide, please. We have a few housekeeping notes to start. So today's event will be taking place in English with French interpretation available. To join the French interpretation, you can click the interpretation button in the lower right. That's the globe. So aujourd'hui, la discussion se ferait en anglais. Si vous souhaitez écouter en
Today, the
français,
discussion will happen in English. If you want to listen in French, you can press on the little globe. We're all bilingual at the Green Municipal Fund. If you want to ask questions in French, it's okay, but the rest will be with interpretation.
As we go through the presentations and discussions today, I really encourage everyone to use our Q&A box, use the chat function, really have a conversation. And if you have any questions about the offer, we have our full GMF team on board to answer your questions, but we'll also have time at the end to discuss. So happy to talk during and after. And lastly, before I pass the baton over, we'll bring this event together by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been First Peoples that have been stewards of what we now call Canada. We recognize the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples as the traditional custodians of the place where I am today in Ottawa-Gatineau, and I deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations, both in shaping and strengthening this community, and in particular, our country as a whole. Just to give you a very brief overview, I'm sure you're all very familiar by now with what the Green Municipal Fund is. The Green Municipal Fund is a $2.4 billion programming fund by the Government of Canada. We work daily to accelerate transformations to resilient net zero communities. You can check out our website for more information, of course, and see all of our funding offers, especially some particularly interesting ones in the community energy systems space, which we're going to be talking about today. We have a couple of objectives today, and I encourage you to keep these in mind. These are the key sort of things that we want to focus on, and I hope that by the end of the hour, you'll be able to leave with a better understanding of what a CES is, how these contribute to reducing GHG emissions, boosting local economies, building partnerships, cutting costs, and strengthening resiliency. This is a topic that we've chosen specifically due to the substantial impact it can have in Canadian municipalities. So keep that in mind. And lastly, do keep in mind, if you're in the market for funding, if you're wondering about how you can make this happen, as we listen to our guest presenters today, think about how you can find and apply for some of our funding, especially this Accelerate offer, which has very interesting ties to capacity building. So if you're unsure, it's always worth to ask if you think that you could apply. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'm very grateful for them to join us today. So we have three amazing members of the community and leaders in their own right. Lydia Fialka, District Energy Strategy Lead, Integrated Infrastructure Services at the City of Edmonton. Thank you for joining us, Lydia. Alan Postolka, the Director of District Energy for Lulu Island Energy Company. based in the city of Richmond. Thanks for joining us today, Alan. And my colleague, Stephanie Bodano, Land Use Sector Development Lead and the Green Municipal Fund, and also the designer of this very exciting offer. So if you have questions, Stephanie is the one to ask for sure. And with that, I will pass it over to Lydia because that is the interesting topic du jour. So over to you, and thank you all again for joining.
Oh, apologies. I got trigger happy, it looks like. Let's get this key back up. Oh, all right. So, uh, just to be interesting, my name is Lydia, but most people around the office call me Lita. So I am the strategy lead for district energy at the City of Edmonton, and I'm really excited to be here today to share a little bit more about our team's work. You know what, Isabel, I might ask you to advance my slides. It's perfect. So next slide, please. So in today's presentation, I'll walk through the roadmap that we're following here at the City of Edmonton to grow our district energy network. But I thought I'd first start off by sharing one of our success stories. So on the screen, what you see is a community energy center that the City of Edmonton is operating in a neighborhood called Blatchford. The system uses GeoExchange as a renewable energy source, and once fully built out, will provide renewable heating, cooling, and hot water services to approximately 30,000 Edmontonians. And Blatchford is truly a unique neighborhood in Edmonton, and it's a project that our team is incredibly proud of. Next slide, please. So building renewable energy systems like the one in Blatchford is driven by the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and use energy more efficiently at a municipal level. So Edmonton, like many other cities from across the world, is experiencing the impacts of climate change. Climate records indicate that our city is warming at a rate faster than the global average. The science is showing that Edmonton will be exposed to higher temperatures, drier summers, more extreme rain and variable weather events, and all of that trending towards a warmer and drier climate. So, as one of the fastest growing cities in Canada, nearing a population of 2 million in the coming decades, it's critical that we not only plan, but also grow our city and infrastructure in a resilient and sustainable way. Next slide, please. So for some background, in 2016, the City of Edmonton investigated how our climate had already changed and how it may change in future. Colleagues conducted an Edmonton-specific climate risk and vulnerability assessment, and that work informed one of our strategies, in particular being the adaptation strategy and action plan. Now, if we fast forward to 2019, Edmonton City Council at that point declared a climate emergency. And with that, city administration was directed to update our community energy transition strategy and action plan. With that update, one of the key action items, or big wins, as we call it, was to create a citywide district energy network. Next slide, please. So why is it a big win? Well, district energy offers a pathway to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from heating and cooling buildings. And in Edmonton, buildings account for approximately 38% of our community greenhouse gas emissions. So understanding that, Edmonton is targeting a 36% reduction in citywide emissions through what we call energy systems transformation. And that includes both low carbon electricity supply, but for me, more interestingly, and what our team is focused on is advancing low carbon district energy systems for thermal energy supply. Next slide, please. So now that council direction was in place for district energy to serve as a key energy solution to drive emissions reductions, the City of Edmonton has now began advancing that work. And the first step was really to identify where in the city bounds did district energy make sense. So how do we do that? We brought on a consultant who supported us in conducting a citywide assessment and identifying district energy opportunity areas. So that work was largely based on a variety of factors, but it looked at density, both existing and planned. It looked at technical feasibility, presence of city-owned facilities that could serve as anchor loads on potential district energy systems, regulatory work, really the full gamut. So the output of that was the district energy strategy. And I believe Isabel may have shared the link already if you're interested to have a look at that. But it also produced the map, right? And identified the 15 areas that are most critical. And this work directly aligns with the GMF Accelerating Community Energy Systems grant. Next slide, please. So now that I've covered the why being the climate emergency, the what being district energy, and the where being the identified opportunity areas for district energy, I think what's most interesting is touching on the how. And while this is a complicated body of work, I've tried to narrow it down to 4 key steps that at the City of Edmonton we took to assess, plan, and implement our district energy strategy. So next slide, please. Number 1 is really gaining political support early on. So growing Edmonton's district energy network is a significant endeavor, and it really does require both city leadership as well as political support. So without the ongoing support of our elected officials, advancing this work simply wouldn't be possible, or it would be paused, indefinitely. Though important to note, given that elected officials and their priorities change over time, that combined with the long-term nature of this work, it's critical that energy transition objectives and district energy be embedded within overarching strategic documents. Next slide, please. So once the political support has been obtained, leadership support has been obtained, the next step is really to look at resourcing and budget required to advance the work. In our case, we have a fairly small team of staff that are dedicated to implementing the district energy strategy. If anyone's interested, it's really myself and 1 engineering project manager, along with a director. We also rely on external consultants to advance technical work. Next slide, please. So once the proper people and the budgets are in place, the next step is really to look at conducting that citywide assessment to understand the potential for district energy and then to further prioritize the identified areas. So as mentioned earlier, at the City of Edmonton, we've identified 15 opportunity areas, and we're currently advancing techno-economic feasibility work and business case development in up to 5 of those. Next slide, please. And then you're looking at implementing the work, and this is a really high-level work plan. And while I don't have time to dig into the specifics today, I'm happy to set up a meeting to chat with anyone who might be interested. At a high level, we're advancing that technical economic work. We're advancing regulatory and policy work, as well as private partnership development, all in tandem. And as we get into the work plan, we can now see why gaining political support early on is really crucial. City Council does need to approve and support multiple tactics, and that could look like approving bylaws or providing support or direction to connect City of Edmonton-owned facilities to district energy systems, approving allocating funding, advocacy. So it's really, again, a key piece. Next slide, please. So in terms of a timeline, this is pulled from our district energy strategy and, starting 2022, when it was published through to 2050, which of course is, we're working towards achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Seeing as this is a long-term project, it'll take decades to realize, it really just drives home the urgency of starting planning and implementing this type of project today. Next slide, please. So where are we now? I thought I could just touch on 2 different district energy projects that are advancing in Edmonton under fairly different conditions, and I would even say the 2 bookends. So on the left-hand side is the community of Blatchford, which is a 536-acre site owned by the City of Edmonton, and it's being developed from the ground up. In this case, we, the City of Edmonton, are the landowner and the developer, and so we have a variety of tools that we can use to require higher built form and to connect and to compel building connections to the district energy system. As part of servicing raw land, we also build the renewable energy infrastructure. Now, on the other bookend, being our downtown, we're currently constructing the first phase of the downtown system, which includes the energy center, as well as connection to the first 3 buildings. The downtown in Edmonton consists of, the majority are older existing buildings. And so really we're looking at retrofitting and connecting these buildings to the district energy system. And it'll be operational next year, so stay tuned. And thank you. I'll end with some final words of, I'll say, wisdom, some lessons learned as you potentially advance similar work. I would say local context is really critical. And a key part of that would be understanding the regulatory framework that your municipality operates in, aka know your municipal jurisdiction. Next is you'll need to advocate and educate. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you'll need to advocate and educate your stakeholders, both internal and external, as your work evolves. An example of that would be involving land use urban planners early on, as it's important to integrate work internally. Look for partnership opportunities, look for funding, like the GMF grant. The photo that we have on the screen here was actually when we announced a $23.7 million grant from the Government of Canada to support the development of the district energy system in Blatchford. And I'll just end by saying this is incredibly exciting work, but it is challenging. And so, celebrate those small wins when you can and really just stay focused on what you're trying to achieve. And that's all on my end. I'll pass it over to whoever's next.
Thanks a lot, Lida. Much appreciated. I was going to ask you a question, but I think we'll save it for the end. So, Alan, please feel free to take over the mic.
Hello, everyone. A slide, please. Perfect. So my name is Alan Postolka, and I'm Director of District Energy with Lulu Island Energy Company, fully owned corporation by City of Richmond. And I'm going to say a little bit more why local governments are uniquely positioned to support implementation or implement community energy systems. Next slide, please. But before, for some of you folks who are not on the West Coast, just explain a little bit about the City of Richmond. Richmond is an island city located to the south of Vancouver on a Fraser River Delta. It is home to Vancouver International Airport. Richmond has undergone enormous change with significant growth over the past 30 years. And this development growth continues today, and it is the reason why the City of Richmond can pursue district energy. But the reason why we pursue district energy is that low carbon district energy initiative become quickly one of the key strategies for the City of Richmond to support its commitment to achieve 50% reduction in community GHG emissions by 2030 and reach net zero emissions by 2050. District energy initiative in City of Richmond has been guided by three main objectives. Cost to customers have to be competitive with conventional energy system costs for the same level of service. The city must own the district energy infrastructure and has authority of setting customer rates. And the system have to provide a flexible platform for adopting low carbon energy technologies. Our first system servicing first two buildings was commissioned in 2012. And fast forward, moving today, we have 3 service areas and servicing 30 buildings, 7,000 residential units, and 7.3 million square feet of floor area. Next slide, please. To deliver these low carbon district energy initiatives, City incorporated in 2013 Lulu Island Energy Company, or LIEC, as I'm going to reference it in my presentation. So LIEC is a municipal corporation wholly owned by the City of Richmond. The first district energy infrastructure has been built by the city and funded by the city. As we realize the growth potential for the district energy and the scale of a related capital investment in the infrastructure needed, we decided to set up a municipal corporation. The main reason for doing this was to make sure that the investment in the district energy infrastructure does not get in conflict with other civic infrastructure investments like swimming pools, community centers, sewer, water infrastructure, etc. If the district energy in a City of Richmond would be just another city department, the liabilities of the investment in the infrastructure would be shown on the city books as the city's liabilities, and that would reduce overall borrowing capacity for the city, limit options if they need to borrow for the other civic infrastructures. Therefore, LIC is established as a so-called government business enterprise. That means a type of municipal corporation that is fully self-sustainable operationally and financially without any assistance from the city. The other one side effect or a reason of establishing corporation was to keep district energy business separate from the city, both from the revenues and liability side, in the case the city decides to sell it in the future. LIC is governed by the board of directors appointed by the city council. We have currently 7 directors and 1 council liaison on the board. Even though LIC is separate entity and formally needs to report to shareholder, city council, only annually presenting year-end financial statements and resolutions, we follow city's reporting procedures like any other city departments, presenting quarterly financial reports, capital and operating budgets, statements on financial information, etc., to the city in order to be fully transparent. We are also going quite often to City Council for endorsement of any major infrastructure agreements and partnerships. Next slide, please. Since we started with the district energy initiatives, we have used various models. The infrastructure for connecting first 2 buildings in 2012 in the Alexandra DU service area was delivered under partnership agreement with the developer and with the initial investment from the city. As the system continued to grow, LIC took over the further infrastructure investment and delivery, while the operation and maintenance was provided by private service provider. The Alexandra DU service area still today operates under this model. The next service area, Oval Village DU, has been delivered through design, build, finance, operate, and maintain model, or DBFOM. LIC and Corix Utilities, a private district energy utility, executed 30 years DBFOM concession agreement, where Corix was to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain Oval Village DU infrastructure, while LIC keeps the oversight of the infrastructure investment as well as ownership of the infrastructure. City Council has authority to set the customer rates. The latest and the largest service area, City Center DU, has been delivered in a similar model. So Corix design, builds, operates, maintains, as well as finances 40% of the infrastructure. And then we brought in Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is financing 60% of the infrastructure. LIC continues to provide oversight of the infrastructure investment and the ownership of the infrastructure, and City Council sets the customer rates. As we were negotiating last 2 agreements for Oval Village and City Center DU in order to secure customer base from the upcoming developments, we also implemented DU Ready policy in 2012. DU Ready policy is a great tool for the municipalities to make sure to secure customer base while the DU is in the planning stage. DU Ready policy requires new developments within the future service area to be designed with hydronic heating system that is compatible with the future district energy system. It is negotiated as a part of the land development process through rezoning and/or official community plan amendments. Every DU-ready development has to register a covenant on a land title, committing that development will connect to DU system when the DU infrastructure is in front of their doors. That DU-ready policy has further evolved in 2018 when City started implementation of Energy Step Code in alignment with the BC Energy Step Code regulations. As a part of the proposal to developments, City offered alternative approach to the building to satisfy energy and GHG intensity reductions. If the building connects to DU or build on-site low-carbon energy plant, the building can use lower energy step code, which means less stringent and less costly envelope requirements. The larger majority of the development chose this alternative. Where we had DU service area already established, we also negotiated that if the development builds on-site low-carbon energy plant, they have to transfer it to LIC to own, maintain, and operate it. LIC then integrates these plants into LIC DU system network when the DU infrastructure is in front of their doors. In the meantime, they are operated by respectable and experienced utility, LIC, instead of being on burden to unsophisticated building stratas. Next slide, please. As noted earlier, one of the main objectives of District Energy Initiative is that the customer cost to customers must be competitive with the conventional energy system for the same level of service. So how are we achieving this? First, by implementing infrastructure just in time. As part of the city, we have inside information on developments coming up, and we trigger any additional infrastructure build out to service new buildings only when the development is close to have or has the building permit. We also use interim energy centers or build modular, expandable energy centers with capacity to service only demand that exists, and we expand it as the new customers connect. Second, by integrating some of the energy infrastructure within the existing city lands, avoiding land cost. For example, we have installed 2 geo-exchange fields in the park within one of our service area. Residents use a bike path, dog off-leash area, and playground built over the geo-fields every day. We also tend to incorporate our permanent energy centers in parks with facilities for public use, such as viewpoints, public washrooms, and covered picnic areas and/or exercise spaces. We are also securing infrastructure contributions from the developers. The developer pays for the on-site DU infrastructure necessary to connect to our system. The cost to the developer is not higher than it would have to if they would have to pay for their on-site energy infrastructure under the business as usual situation. And often it is less than that. We are also securing government grants and low-cost financing from other levels of government. For example, for the city center DU infrastructure, we secured up to 175 million in funding from Canada Infrastructure Bank under the superior financing terms. And finally, only for really large developments, we try to negotiate airspace parcels for the interim and/or permanent energy center on the developer's land at no cost to LIC. Again, the deal is that the cost to the developer is not higher than what they would have to pay for the on-site energy infrastructure under the business as usual. Next slide, please. It is important to note that even with all these cost reduction tools I noted earlier, your business case will not work unless you have secured customer base to pay for the infrastructure and services. Well, in British Columbia, municipalities have a broad powers to provide any services that City Council considers necessary or desirable. In Richmond, City Council recognized the benefits of district energy to the community as a key tool to achieve its GHG reduction goals, and as such identify district energy as one of the necessary services for the community. So City has powers during the land development process negotiations to secure commitment from the developer to connect the development to LIC district energy system as well as the on-site infrastructure contributions. The city has also implemented the service area bylaw, which makes connection to district energy mandatory for all new developments within the service area. Furthermore, LIC as a city corporation is directly involved in the city's land development review process, which allows LIC to track the development's progress and timing and can plan just-in-time infrastructure build-out. Next slide, please. To summarize, as a district energy services provider, through land use regulation, including official community plan, zoning, development, and building permit application, local governments can identify upcoming new developments and require them to be designed to connect to their community energy systems. Municipalities in British Columbia have the ability to create a customer base through land development regulation, and therefore have a critical role to play in low-carbon community energy systems development. With clear policy and communication about the community's long-term goals, the customer base is secured for the successful project, and the fairness to developers and end users is assured. Thank you. Next slide.
Alan, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I think there's a lot of lessons learned, and we have quite a few questions in the Q&A for you, so not surprisingly. And I think that for sure something for everyone to think of is how does your provincial context change versus the context that they have in British Columbia? So hopefully at the end we can have a little discussion on that. In the meantime, I will pass the baton over to my colleague Stephanie, who's going to give us more details on the Accelerating Community Energy Systems offer. over to you, Stephanie.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So next slide, please. Awesome. So I wanted to just start, first of all, by introducing myself. So Stephanie Bodeno, I'm the lead for the land use sector at the Green Municipal Fund. And I'm going to be focusing my presentation today on our latest and newest contribution to the community energy systems space, which is our Accelerating Community Energy Systems offer. But I did want to provide just a quick snapshot of all the other funding products that we currently have available focused on community energy systems. So we have grants of up to $100,000 for assessing community energy system options as well as their business models. We have grants of up to $200,000 for conducting a feasibility study to design a community energy system. And we also offer loans combined with grants to actually construct a community energy system. And those loans can go up to $10 million with a grant maximum of 15% of the loan amount. But if your project is on a brownfield site and involves the remediation of a brownfield site, that grant can actually go up to 20%. So in the case of our grants for business cases and feasibility studies, the maximum eligible costs are 50%, but it can go up to 80% for small communities, northern communities, and eligible Indigenous communities, and even up to 100% for first-time northern or eligible Indigenous communities. Next slide, please. And again. And again. It would be better if I was driving this. So basically, the overarching goal of this new funding offer is really to help accelerate net zero neighborhoods through an increased deployment and use of community energy systems. So what we're offering with this offer, which is a little bit different than the other offerings I just mentioned, is that we're combining study grants with capacity developments to help local governments really work on creating the enabling conditions for low carbon community energy systems initiatives. Next slide. So when we say low carbon community energy systems, we mean district heating and cooling systems, like we've just heard in the past two presentations. But we're also that also includes renewable energy generation, such as solar installations, in cases where district heating and cooling doesn't make sense for the community or the local context. Next slide. So broadly speaking, as in terms of an overview, this offer is open to local governments, municipal corporations such as municipal utilities, and eligible Indigenous communities. This grant is up to $200,000, covering 50% of eligible costs with the same exceptions I mentioned earlier. And successful applicants will actually be able to participate in a 2-year learning program to help increase the success of their project. Next slide. So at a high level, what we're funding through this grant program is studies that aim to identify, evaluate, and prioritize opportunity areas for low carbon energy, community energy systems, and then assess and develop mechanisms to support implementation. So this study can feed into a broader community energy planning exercise or can flow from one of those planning exercises, as the case was with the city of Edmonton. And ultimately, it should really be laying the groundwork for more focused work on community energy systems within the community, such as developing business cases and feasibility studies, for instance. Slide. So in terms of the learning program, so the peer learning program that the applicants or the successful applicants will participate in will involve, receiving skills development, training, coaching, connecting with national leaders in the space, and it will involve a mix of online and in-person workshops over a period of 2 years, where travel costs would be covered by GMF. Next slide. So I'll dive into the details now. Next slide, yeah, thanks. So this is sort of an overview of the scope of work that we're wanting to fund through this grant program. So basically, you'll see a lot of commonalities with the approach that the city of Edmonton took to develop their district energy strategy. So the key step is really to start by identifying the opportunity areas within the community and prioritizing them. Then moving on to model the baseline energy demand in each of those priority areas. This is very important in terms of assessing the potential for community energy systems within those areas. And then some, fleshing out what the concrete next steps would be to actually advance community energy systems in those areas. And that should include a policy review to identify any implementation barriers that might exist, particularly from the land use planning perspective. Working to develop a robust and inclusive stakeholder engagement strategy. We heard Lydia talk about the importance of engaging stakeholders such as the council and others early on in the process to really build buy-in and also lay the groundwork for some potential partnerships. And then diving into assessing and prioritizing implementation mechanisms to help accelerate community energy system development within either the priority areas or the municipality at large. And then doing a deep dive into one or more of those implementation mechanisms. So really looking at the legal, the financing, the technical, regulatory requirements. And one of those implementation mechanisms is, developing supportive municipal land use policies. So that should be included in the scope of work as well. And then lastly, the importance of really conducting market research to gauge stakeholder support and industry readiness for this type of work within the area. Next slide. So when we're talking about, the analysis of opportunity areas, what we mean is really conducting a geospatial analysis to identify which neighborhoods have the right density and land uses to support a community energy system. So the factors to consider include development density, the presence of energy intensive land uses such as industrial parks or data centers that are existing or planned, the presence of a potential anchor load for a new district energy system. This is particularly relevant to look at, where are the municipally owned buildings, particularly pools and arenas, because these can be a great fit for those types of systems. The availability of municipally owned land, where there could be a potential to utilize that land for the deployment of those systems. Proximity to low carbon thermal resources such as paper mills and wastewater treatment plants, as well as any existing or planned community energy systems. And then of course, the ease of access and other constraints should be looked at as well. Next slide. And when we're talking about implementation mechanisms, what we're really talking about are the mechanisms that create the enabling conditions for community energy systems deployment. So this is very broad. The speakers spoke to a lot of those in their presentation, and we're non-prescriptive in terms of the ones that the funding recipients can assess in the course of their study. So they can look at, what would it entail to create a municipal utility? What are the different types of partnerships or contracting arrangements for the operations of community energy systems that we can be a part of? Can we develop, incentive programs like a property tax rebate or fast track approval processes for projects that involve community energy systems? What would it entail for for the municipality to commit to connecting all municipally owned buildings to community energy, to district energy systems in the future? What are the options in terms of mandatory connection or district energy ready bylaw requirements, that sort of thing? But the one implementation mechanism that must be included in the scope of work is really the development of supportive land use policies. And that was mentioned in the presentations as well. So really looking into the local land use planning context and making sure that policies are in place to support the development of these systems. Next slide. As with our feasibility studies in many of our sectors, your study must include an equity assessment to really look at what are the opportunities to address barriers to equity deserving groups and to reduce negative impacts, and how can we actually increase the positive advantages for these groups as part of these projects. Next slide. So when we're going to be assessing initiatives, there's some key things that we are going to be looking for. So these are the pro tips if you're planning on submitting an application. So we'll be giving preference to initiatives that really have the potential to lead to significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're seeing a strong focus on energy intensive buildings and land uses such as pools, arenas, industrial parks, wastewater treatment plants. We're looking for projects that are set up for success because they're supported by, the really key actors in these types of initiatives, particularly, political leaders, senior municipal staff, landowners, developers, utilities, that sort of thing. Projects that are being led by multidisciplinary teams. So something that's not just siloed within one municipal department, but that we're seeing that there's, participation and buy-in from other key departments like planning, sustainability, finance, energy, operations, and so on. We're looking for projects that are in strong alignment with key municipal policies like the official community plan or secondary plan, community energy plan, or climate action plan. And also projects that are conducted in collaboration with key implementation partners like utilities, developers, and so on. Next slide. We'll be also looking for projects that are, conducted in collaboration with equity deserving groups, projects that are embedding sustainable land use principles, so that are seeking to advance, transit-oriented development. They're wanting to foster compact and complete neighborhoods through, anchoring these neighborhoods around a district energy system. And then, we're looking also for projects that are embedding climate resilience considerations within their planning process. So, considering flood risks, for example, when selecting priority areas. Next slide. So in terms of the timeline, our pre-applications are due on February 21st. So this is when you're just going to be really providing, the high level objectives for your initiative, your anticipated benefits, and what your total budget will be. And then in April is when you'll be submitting your full application. So that's when you really do more of a deep dive into your budget, your work plan, your project team, and that sort of thing. The funding decisions will be made next summer, and the learning program will begin in the fall. But I want to note that you can begin your project anytime. You're not bound to this timeline. However, only the costs that would be incurred after the submission of your full application would be eligible for reimbursement, other than the cost to prepare the application. And the next slide, I believe this is my last. So I really encourage you to get in touch with our outreach team. They are there to help you, think through your project, figure out if this is the right fit for you, help you understand this funding offer as well as all of our funding offers. They'll review your pre-application and really set you up for success to submit the best full application. So those their contact details are on the screen, and they'll be shared again at the end. Slide. And that's it. Okay, I guess I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. I could also ask our other guests to turn their cameras back on if you're still around. Great, welcome back. We have a lot of questions, and I'm happy to dive into them. So folks, feel free to use the Q&A box or the general chat if you have questions for any of our speakers. I'm just going to start by exploring a few of the more general ones, I think, and then we could get into some more specifics if we like. So the first question, which I saw come up a few times for you, Stephanie, how applicable is this offer to small and medium-sized communities?
Yeah, thanks for that. I tried to respond to that a little bit in the chat, but that is a great question, and we are really hoping to see applications from a broad range of communities. Certainly our speakers are coming from a more larger community context, but we are really hoping to see applications from small communities as well. As I mentioned in the chat, when we're talking about district energy systems, the size of these systems can really vary, and it can be something as small as connecting a few municipal buildings together, connecting. And then also just taking advantage for municipalities that, small communities that have a paper mill in their community. There's a lot of waste heat there. There might be an opportunity to make use of that waste heat for other purposes. So, and then of course, renewables are often very agnostic of community size. So we're really, the scope of the study is really municipalities are going to be looking at, the extent of what their territory is. And if that's a small jurisdiction, that's totally fine. We would be more than happy to receive applications from those communities as well.
Thank you. I have another one for you, Stephanie, and it's about the types of things that we fund with this grant. So does this funding apply to the development of community energy plans themselves? So that's creating the plan.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the scope of work that is going to be covered by this funding offer was detailed in this presentation, and it's also detailed on our website. And that is definitely something that can be within the context of a community energy plan. And if that's something that a municipality is currently working on, that's great. But this would be sort of the what the part that we would cover is what covers the scope of work that I presented here. But I think that there's maybe just a small distinction in terms of the typical scope of a community energy plan. Often they'll stay kind of at a higher level than what we're talking about here, is really to take it into the implementation piece. So it's not just, the identification of opportunity areas and next steps, but then it's like, and then we're looking at, implementation mechanisms and actually having funding to develop some of those implementation mechanisms, particularly the piece around supportive land use policies, but also, in incentive programs or assessing, the opportunity to create a municipal district energy utility and that sort of thing. So I think that that's a key distinction. Certainly, this study I think will be very beneficial from two community energy planning processes. I think often it will probably flow out of a community energy planning process, but yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. Next question is for, I guess, both Lida and Alan. Feel free, either one of you, to answer this. Couple questions here on rate of return and investment. I think that that's something that municipal staff, contend with, and not just them, but also councils justifying costs. And that is something that they look at when they're going through their plans and at that phase. So I guess I would start by saying, Lida, you mentioned in your presentation that having the support of your council was key. So they must have seen something in this, and I think also, Alan, you had that support too at that level. So we don't have to provide all of the details, but how much of a factor in the success of your program was having that sort of rate of return type of information?
I don't know, Lida, if you don't mind, I can start. And from our perspective, we weren't concentrating as much of rate of return as much of to make sure that our customer rates, of course, as long as you maintain your long-term rates low to the customers and you have positive business case, as you know, even though we are for-profit corporation, but at the end of the day, we behave the same as municipality. So it's not expectations. At the end of the day, it will be council long-term goal at the time to maintain the lowest possible rates to the customers, or potentially use some revenues received from utility for some other cities initiatives. But overall, yeah, it's very important. You have to have positive business case, but think about it that it's kind of like when you start your sewer or drainage or water network, you don't expect return within the first 10 years and not even 3 years. So don't plan like that. At least that was our goal.
Yeah, I think I would really just echo what Alan said, and maybe I'll say that certainly has been and continues to be a challenge, right? District energy systems are very capital intensive projects. And I try to lightly toe around the fact that that timeline doesn't necessarily align very well with municipal budget cycles, right? When it's 4 years, you have turnover on council and committee. So it is a challenge. And I think what's important is to stay grounded in the why. And for us, we're not doing this to make money. We're doing this because this is a tangible action that we can take and we have municipal jurisdiction over to drive emissions reduction. And, there's other things that we don't have municipal jurisdiction over. And I think that's what we use at the city it's communicating that to our councilors so that they understand what is within their realm, what is the cost, but certainly having a positive business case is an important part of that as well.
If I can sum that up, having a positive business case helps, but it's not all that there is. There are other aspects in making that pitch and going forward with it. So and that's how you get buy-in. I feel that that's similar across a lot of the programs that we have here at GMF. It's we're improving community buildings because it improves the well-being of our residents, and they're more efficient and have cost savings in the long run. So seeing that dual benefit is really important to push. Thank you. Just having a scan of our questions here. Yeah, so there's one here from Ian, and I think this is interesting because we do have quite a diverse group here, and I think this is more of a general question. This is a challenge that we see across Canada. I don't want to open up the policy discussion too much, but if we think about how you can make this project happen, you both mentioned one of the key things is working with the utilities. That's different province to province, but maybe from each of your respective experiences, you could speak to what that's looked like. And any more sort of detailed advice on that would be helpful, because I think that that's something that we see as a bit of a barrier to launch in some provinces and jurisdictions. So how did that relationship evolve, maybe, and where did it get to today?
So as I mentioned, we do have a large 30-year partnership agreement with private utility partner, and I think it's important to realize that it is a new utility for the city, and it is certain expertise that you would need to achieve. And the best part is that instead of you building your own internal, that's at least what City of Richmond approach was, to partner with outside utilities who already prepare or made those kind of projects and deliver those projects and operating and maintaining those, and work with them closely. It's just like any other partnership. It's give and take. It's nothing perfect, but you just have to work together. And at the end of the day, you get, if you have the same goal, I think it will be success.
And maybe just to add a little City of Edmonton touch on this. So I realize I didn't go into a ton of detail into a lot of the different projects, but the downtown project is one that we are advancing in partnership with EPCOR as our design, build, operate, maintain, and finance partner for phase 1 of the system. They're required to operate and maintain the system in its full, but there are opportunities for us to, extend other partnerships, whether it be for downtown or other systems, and that's something that we're actively looking at, because we realize it's not sustainable for us as the city to wear all of the hats for all 15 of these opportunity areas, right? That will eventually, well, we hope we'll have district energy systems. And so we realize that it's really critical to have those strong utility partners at the table. So as I mentioned, we work with EPCOR, but we also engage with other utilities as well. So
in other words, don't try to do it all. Make partnerships where they count. Yeah, that's great. And Olympia, I'll be able to answer that question. We are planning on the cohort being bilingual, so we do encourage communities from Francophone and Anglophone Canada to join. And for the second part of your question, for those that aren't involved in the cohort, as you've all seen today, we are talking about the accelerating offer in this session, but we do have still the community energy systems offer, and we're planning to have a lot of connection between these groups. So while there's going to be the dedicated cohort and the accelerate stream, we're also going to have other supports for everyone that's in the community energy systems funding. So I really hope to see a lot of that sort of intermingling between the two groups, because there's a lot to learn, and I think a lot of work to be done in Canada for that. Yeah, it's a great question here. So I think we have time for a few more. There's a good one from Ian. Can multiple municipalities partner on an application? And in Durham's case, they're a regional municipality, have local area municipalities, and they're, how can they collaborate to deliver on DE systems? So what does that region to city structure look like in our funding stream? I guess that's more for you, Stephanie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we're definitely, open to receiving joint applications for sure. I think that we'd have to sort of, have maybe a specific conversation to discuss the mechanics of how that would work in terms of, how the grant would be allocated into which municipal body. But we certainly have supported kind of omnibus applications in the past, so it's something that we can do. But they're kind of a case by case basis. So we could, I'd be happy to set up a meeting to chat it through.
And I think I'd take this opportunity to ask one question to you as well, Stephanie, about some of the things that we're looking for. In your presentation, you spoke about wanting to see applicants show us how they're working in inclusive ways with their community. What does that look like if someone is looking to apply for this grant in practice?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're not prescriptive about how how municipality approaches that. For sure, it's going to vary from one context to another. But I think that at the very least, in the first part of the the work, when you're doing your geospatial analysis and you're assessing opportunity and trying to identify opportunity areas for community energy systems, certainly kind of having that additional layer about looking at the socioeconomic demographic conditions of the different neighborhoods and working with different community partners to maybe prioritize areas where there might be a need for affordable clean energy, looking at where are affordable housing developments located within the community. Is there an opportunity to partner with local affordable housing providers who often are leading the charge in terms of sustainable approaches to housing development. So those are the kinds of thinking that look at partnering with community groups, partnering with equity disturbing groups, certainly trying to working to advance reconciliation objectives by partnering with either urban indigenous or a neighboring indigenous community. These are the types of things that municipalities can applicants can consider when they're putting forward their applications.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That's